All right, diving in. Today, we're going to be looking at the world of online gaming.
Ooh, exciting.
Yeah, specifically World of Warcraft's Battleground Blitz.
Okay.
We found this really interesting thread on the World of Warcraft forums. It's called PvP Sellers Ruining Battleground Blitz.
PvP sellers? What, like, people are paying to win?
Well, that's kind of the whole thing. Players are saying that there are organized groups intentionally sabotaging matches.
Wow.
And maybe they're doing it for money, right? Like throwing the match for some kind of payout.
That would be wild. If true, that could really shake up the whole competitive gaming scene.
For sure. It brings up some big questions about, fairness and integrity and all that.
Totally.
So the whole thing starts with this player, Hellgraves, who kicks off the thread with a pretty bold claim.
Okay, lay it on me.
They're basically saying that these organized groups are throwing matches in Battleground Blitz.
Interesting. Why would they do that?
Well, that's where the selling idea comes in.
Okay, I'm listening.
Players are speculating that maybe these groups are manipulating the outcomes to benefit specific people. Or even like making money by intentionally losing.
Wow. It's a pretty big accusation. What makes Hellgraves so sure?
Well, they talk about this, crazy losing streak they had.
Won't we all have those sometimes?
Yeah, but they're saying they had something like 10, 12 losses in a row,
Ooh.
which in their mind is statistically impossible in a truly random system.
Yeah, I could see how that would raise some eyebrows.
Right. And that's where the whole idea that something fishy is going on starts to take hold.
I bet that thread blew up.
Oh.
What was the reaction like?
Oh, it totally did. You see those classic, internet arguments?
People picking sides?
Yeah, some players jump right in and they're like, yeah, I've seen this too.
Leavers.
Totally. And then there are others who are like, hold on, where's the proof?
The skeptics.
Exactly. So you have these two camps forming, those who believe the accusations and those who are demanding hard evidence.
That's how it always goes, right? Makes you wonder about that need for control,
Like, people want to believe there's a reason for everything.
Yeah, like when you're faced with a string of losses, it's almost comforting to think there's some mastermind behind it.
Right. It's easier to blame some shadowy group than to admit you're just having a bad run.
Makes you feel less powerless.
Totally. So one player, Sultry, they really jump in to support Hellgraves.
Oh, what did they say?
They're like, I've experienced this too. And all these people saying it's not happening, they're probably the ones doing it.
Ooh, conspiracy theories already.
Yeah. And then there are others like Akatsuki and Chenks who are like, whoa, 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 we need some hard evidence before we go believing this.
Classic internet debate.
Right. But you can see how things are already getting heated.
That makes sense. It's easy for things to escalate online where everyone's anonymous.
And it's not just empty accusations either. Players are sharing their own experiences as proof.
Ooh, juicy. Like what?
Well, they're talking about inexplicable losing streaks or sudden rating drops that make no sense.
Oh yeah, that's frustrating.
And even matches where it feels like, the other team just magically knows what they're doing.
Suspicious.
Right. And there's this one moment that Hellgraves describes that's brutal.
Oh no.
They're saying after this awful string of losses, they finally win a match.
Good for them.
But then they see the message, rating unchanged. They didn't gain any rating for the win.
Ouch.
Yeah, that's got to be demoralizing. It feels like, to them, the system is working against them.
Right, that's the feeling they're getting. So then what happens?
Well, those who are skeptical, they start getting labeled as deniers or even bots.
Oh boy, here we go.
Yeah, if you don't believe the accusations, you're part of the problem.
It's not how you have a healthy debate. It's just turning into an us versus them thing.
Exactly. Nuance. Critical thinking. Out the window.
Yikes. So it's just a bunch of accusations and name calling at this point.
Well, not entirely. There are some players who are offering alternative explanations for these, seemingly impossible losses.
Oh, interesting. What are they saying?
Well, some of them are pointing to the game's matchmaking system as a possible culprit.
Okay, so maybe it's not intentional sabotage after all.
Exactly. We've got to look at all the possibilities before we jump to conclusions, right?
Absolutely. Let's hear what they have to say.
Okay, so matchmaking. Tell me more about that. How could that be causing these losing streaks?
Well, a lot of players in the thread are pointing to something called MMR.
MMR.
What's that? It stands for matchmaking rating.
Ah, okay.
It's basically this hidden number that the game uses to match players with others who are at a similar skill level.
Makes sense. Try to keep things fair.
Exactly. But the thing is, the MMR system, it isn't perfect.
Oh, I can imagine.
Think of it kind of like those old school dating sites,
Okay.
They try to match you based on your interests and stuff, But sometimes you get paired with someone who's like totally not your type.
I've definitely been there.
Right. And it's kind of the same with MMR. Sometimes the system just doesn't get it quite right.
And that can lead to some pretty lopsided matches.
Yeah, exactly. And so you might feel like, oh, the other team is way better than us. They must be cheating.
Yeah.
But really, it's just like a quirk of the matchmaking system.
So it's not sabotage, it was just bad luck of the draw.
In a way, yeah. And one player in the thread, Soul Priest, they bring this up. They're like, hey, maybe the MMR is just out of whack right now, and that's why everyone's experiencing these losing streaks.
That's a good point. So maybe we shouldn't be so quick to jump to conclusions about foul play.
Right. There could be other explanations. And actually, there are some players who are focusing on a totally different angle.
Oh, really? What's that?
Well, instead of blaming, like, shadowy figures or the matchmaking system, they're talking about, strategy and individual skill.
Okay, so they're basically saying, get good.
Kind of. Like one player, Dactylian, they jump in, they're like, hey, maybe if you focused on working with your healers and, like, actually using good strategy, you'd win more.
I can see how that might ruffle some feathers.
Definitely. Not everyone wants to hear that. But it is a good point, right?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you just gotta look inward instead of always blaming external factors.
Totally.
Yeah.
And Dactylian's comment, it actually sparks this whole other conversation in the thread.
Oh, about what?
About how important it is to, like, really understand the game's mechanics and develop those high-level strategies.
Okay, yeah. World of Warcraft, it's not just about button mashing, is it?
No way, especially at that competitive level. It's like you got to know your character, you got to know your role, you got to know how to work as a team.
It's a whole other level of thinking.
Yeah, totally. And I think sometimes what might look like sabotage to someone who's just watching, could actually just be like a mistimed ability or a bad call by the team leader.
So not necessarily malicious, just like human error.
Exactly. And this is where critical thinking comes in. Before we start throwing around accusations, we got to consider all the factors, right?
Yeah, we got to look at the bigger picture, not just focus on our own individual experience.
And that's a good lesson for, life in general, isn't it?
Totally. So we've got a lot going on here. Accusations of sabotage, a potentially wonky matchmaking system, the importance of strategy and individual skill, and the always present possibility of human error. It's a lot to unpack.
It is. And I think this whole thread, it's a good reminder that the truth is rarely simple or easy to find, especially online.
Yeah, there's always more to the story than meets the eye. So how do we make sense of it all?
Well, that's where those critical thinking skills come in.
Right, being able to sift through all the noise and figure out what's really going on.
Exactly. And to be open to the possibility that, we might not have all the answers.
I feel like that's a hard thing to do these days. Everyone wants a clear answer, a good guy, a bad guy.
It's tempting, for sure. But sometimes the most important thing is to just acknowledge the complexity of the situation.
Not just jump to conclusions.
Right. And this World of Warcraft thread, as messy as it is, I think it's a good example of that. It's a reminder to be skeptical, to think critically, and to be open to different perspectives.
Even when those perspectives challenge our own beliefs.
Exactly.
Wow. Yeah, it feels like we really went deep on this one.
Yeah, we did. Started with like accusations of cheating, then we got into matchmaking, and now we're talking about like the nature of truth itself.
It's kind of mind-blowing. And I gotta say, I'm still not sure what to believe about those match manipulation claims.
Me neither. And I think that's okay.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, sometimes there just isn't a clear-cut answer, especially when you're dealing with, stuff online.
So what do we do then? Just like shrug our shoulders and move on?
Not exactly. I think it's about being comfortable with uncertainty.
Okay.
Like being okay with not knowing everything for sure.
That's tough though. It feels like everyone always wants a definitive answer.
Right? But sometimes it's just not possible. And that's where I think intellectual humility comes in.
Intellectual what now?
Humility. It basically means being open to the possibility that you might be wrong.
Oh.
Or that, your understanding of something might be incomplete.
So like admitting you don't know everything.
Yeah. And being willing to learn from others, even if they have different opinions than you.
That's a good point. It's easy to get stuck in your own little bubble, especially online.
Totally. But if we can step outside of that and be a little more humble, I think we can actually learn a lot more.
Yeah, makes sense. So even though we didn't solve the mystery of the ruined Battleground Blitz, we still learned something valuable.
For sure. This whole deep dive, it's been a lesson in critical thinking.
And being open-minded.
Exactly. and realizing that, sometimes the journey is more important than the destination.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah. So to wrap things up, I hope everyone listening will remember to approach information, especially online, with a healthy dose of skepticism.
And to be willing to consider different viewpoints.
Totally. Keep those critical thinking skills sharp, folks, and don't be afraid to ask questions.
Awesome. Well, on that note, I think it's time for us to log out of this deep dive. Thanks for joining us.
And until next time, happy gaming.